They can make him read new words from a teleprompter. But he is still the same man who insults Gold Star families, demeans women, mocks people with disabilities, and thinks he knows more about ISIS than our generals. There is no new Donald Trump. This is it.
Hillary Clinton on the stump this week. We're joined now by her campaign manager, Robby Mook. Thank you for joining us this morning. And you heard Kellyanne Conway say, no, we are seeing a different Donald Trump. Best week of the campaign in the last week. And he's reinforcing that with new policies, while Hillary Clinton promises more of the same.
Well, George, we're not seeing a pivot. Donald Trump himself said this was not a pivot. He wants to double down on letting Donald Trump be Donald Trump. That's why he's brought in to run his campaign someone who wrote or rather ran a so-called news organization, Breitbart News, which has peddled some of the worst conspiracy theories around. They've run news, that quote-unquote news, that's been defended white supremacists, that's been sexist, racist, the worst of our politics. So I think we should be very concerned. I would also point out that Paul Manafort has been pushed out, but that doesn't mean that the Russians have been pushed out of this campaign. The hand of the Kremlin has been at work in this campaign for some time. It's clear that they are supporting Donald Trump, but we now need Donald Trump to explain to us the extent to which the hand of the Kremlin is at the core of his own campaign. There's a web of financial interests that have not been disclosed, and there are real questions being raised about whether Donald Trump himself is just a puppet for the Kremlin in this race.
You're saying Donald Trump is a puppet for the Kremlin?
Well, real questions are being raised about that. Again, there's a web of financial ties to the Russians that he refuses to disclose. We've seen over the last few weeks him parroting Vladimir Putin in his own remarks. We saw the Republican Party platform change. We saw Donald Trump talk about leaving NATO and leaving our Eastern European allies vulnerable to a Russian attack. The gentleman he brought with him to his security briefing just last week is someone who's on the payroll of the Russia Times, which is basically a propaganda arm of the Kremlin. He was sitting 2 seats away from Vladimir Putin at their 10th anniversary gala. There are a lot of questions here, and we need Donald Trump to disclose all of his financial ties and whether his advisors are having meetings with the Kremlin.
A lot of questions this week also about the Clinton Foundation. You announced this week that the foundation would no longer take contributions from foreign governments or corporations if Secretary Clinton wins the White House. And that has raised a lot of questions. People wondering why now and not when she was Secretary of State. Donald Trump Jr. in a tweet on Thursday said, is it okay to accept foreign and corporate money when Secretary of State, but not when POTUS? And you just heard Kellyanne Conway. Doesn't it suggest that taking those contributions when Secretary Clinton was serving as Secretary of State was wrong?
Well, first of all, George, the steps that were taken when Secretary Clinton went to the State Department were unprecedented. It's important to keep in mind, this is a nonprofit philanthropic organization. 90% of the cost of malaria drugs has come down because of the work of the Clinton Foundation. There are over 10 million people around the globe today receiving life-saving HIV and AIDS drug treatments because of the Clinton Foundation. We look at Donald Trump, his bottom line is interconnected to all kinds of financial interests that he refuses to disclose. They actually affect his net worth. So the steps that are being taken, if she should become president, are unprecedented. We're happy that planning is taking place. But I think when we talk about transparency, when we talk about disclosure, Donald Trump needs to release his taxes. He needs to explain his financial ties. Just yesterday, we read in the New York Times that his businesses owe millions of dollars to the Bank of China. Donald Trump talks all the time about a trade war with China. How can he really do that when millions of dollars of his own bottom line could be affected directly by the Chinese government?
Let's stay on the foundation, though, for a second. It's not just Secretary Clinton's critics who are suggesting a change should come. You've had former governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell, said that they should stop taking the contributions now, should disband. The Boston Globe endorsed Secretary Clinton during the primaries. Here's what they wrote. The Clinton Foundation is clearly a liability for Hillary Clinton as she seeks the presidency. The foundation should remove a political and an actual distraction and stop accepting funding. If Clinton is elected, the foundation should be shut down. Will that happen?
Well, what the foundation has said is that they will continue to operate. Again, George, I want to keep in mind, millions of people around the world depend on life-saving health treatments that the foundation provides. So just pulling the plug on that literally would threaten lives around the globe. So the foundation is in the process of figuring out how to refocus, reshift. As I said earlier, the steps that they've pledged to take as a philanthropic organization are unprecedented. You didn't hear questions about the Bush Foundation when the second Bush president came into office. His family continued to serve on the board there. President Clinton has said he'll step down from the Clinton Foundation board.
But hasn't it become a liability?
No, look, what the foundation is saying is that they don't want to become a distraction, that they want to go as far as they possibly can to make sure there's no possible conflict of interest. But again, George, I just want to be fair here. Donald Trump is refusing to disclose deep financial ties that potentially reach into the Kremlin, which could influence his foreign policy decisions, but also where countries like China have leverage over him and could potentially distort his decision-making there. None of this is being disclosed. You and I are having this conversation because the foundation has chosen to take unprecedented steps to disclose their donors.